So first, my name and our team's names. My name is Dimitar. I'm one of the co-founders of Kanbanize. I wear multiple hats, and as we will learn about blockers, we need to help each other. And because Yana is quite sick right now and cannot deliver the whole thing, but thank you for being here, Yana. I stepped in, and we'll give a hand. But Yana, please say a few words about yourself as well.
Hi, everyone. It's very nice to see you here on this webinar. My name is Yana. I'm heading the customer success team. I know some of you I don't, but I'm very excited to be sharing this event with you.
All right. So we have a few other team members on the call. We have Svetoslav, we have Nicola. Guys, say hi. If you need anybody from our side, always feel free to reach out. So now I will, okay, we have Dimi as well. Hey, Dimi, from the team as well. I will share a quick presentation, maybe 15 minutes or so. Then we will show you a few product tips. Maybe you know that, maybe you don't. I hope it will be interesting. And then we will open for questions and discussion. So feel free to engage. All right, let me share my screen now. Okay, can I be a host or something, because I can't share right now?
Yep, just a second, and it's done.
All right, so let's see. Can you see my screen? I guess
yep.
It's a yes. All right, so we will start with, as I said, a quick presentation, which is named with a nice name, Blockers Are Your Friends. And I'd like to show you one of my favorite quotes by a person called Taiichi Ono. For those of you who haven't heard about him, if there are such people at all, this was one of the major contributors to the Toyota production system. He's considered the father of the Toyota production system, the so-called TPS. And he was one of the brightest minds in the lean world. Although Toyota do not call lean what we call lean, he's considered one of the fathers of the lean knowledge. And he says, having no problems is the biggest problem of all. And I like this a lot, because who doesn't have any problems, right? We all do. And especially in knowledge work, we are buried in problems. But some organizations recognize a lot of problems and work towards fixing them, but others prefer to close their eyes and live in denial. But the blockers, because they are our friends, can help us not to live in denial and recognize the problems, which ultimately make us better. I want to continue with our reference to Toyota, and I want to show you what this person is doing. They are basically pulling this yellow rope, which is called andon cord. And what this cord does when being pulled, it signals that there is some sort of a problem with the production line. And if you're wondering, what do we have to do with production lines and manufacturing, just give me a few minutes, it will start making more sense. I know that probably most of you are not building cars, but we can relate to that. So there's a manufacturing plant. There are one or more production lines where vehicles move at a steady state. And there are people working at their own stations. So every person is responsible for a specific set of actions, which ultimately result in a car being produced, right? But what if you have a problem? Well, if you have a problem that you cannot resolve within the time frame that you have, which means that the car will pass your station and you will not be able to resolve the problem, you pull this andon cord. It's A-N-D-O-N, andon cord. Some flashlights start flashing. Some people say that classical music starts playing. I'm not sure if that's the case. I haven't been to these plants. But bottom line is that everybody's attention is attracted. And the line still keeps moving, all right? But if within some certain time frame, this problem that has been identified by pulling down on cord is not fixed, then the whole production line stops, so that this problem in this specific vehicle can be fixed or resolved. Why I'm telling you this is because stopping the whole production line has been considered heresy for the Western car manufacturers. Mercedes, for example, we have German people on the call, please don't take it personal. Mercedes bragged about spending X amount of hours, I think it was 1,000 hours, I don't remember, but many, many hours fixing issues inside their vehicles after they were off the production line. And that's why the quality was so high. But it was taking a lot of time, it was taking a lot of resources. It was causing the same types of issues to be fixed over and over and over again in the Mercedes-Benz vehicles. The Toyota guys realized that stopping the line as soon as the issue is identified, fixing the issue and not allowing the issue to be replicated in each of the following vehicles was actually much cheaper for the whole company than fixing issues after the vehicle was off the production line. So this is one of the things that made a huge difference in the productivity of Toyota and their ability to produce so many vehicles with such a great quality. You know that Japanese are well known for their quality. So this is one of the reasons. What does it translate to in our world? To be able to make the connection, I want to introduce one term, which I'm sure everybody has heard probably. This is the term flow at the middle right here. These are the 5 principles of lean. We won't talk about value stream, pull, and perfection. We might touch them some other time, but I want to talk about flow. So what is flow? Basically, flow is the movement of materials and information across the value stream so that it is converted from materials and information to a whole product. And at every place where the information or materials stop is considered a hindrance in the flow of work. There is even a metric which is called flow efficiency, and we won't go too much into formula and stuff, so don't worry about this. There's even a metric called flow efficiency, which is calculated as a percentage between the value adding time and the total time that the work took to be done. So to translate that, if the total time for a job was 10 days, but you only worked on it, you really worked on it only 1 day, then you would have flow efficiency of 10%. It means that you only spent 10% of the total time working on this thing. Some people call this value adding time touch time, because you were actually touching the work only 1 day out of 10. And it's an interesting phenomenon, especially in larger corporations. The flow efficiency for the majority of the value streams is a single-digit %, and it's a low single-digit %. What this basically means is that our work spends 90+% waiting or being blocked. And that's the single most valuable place to look for improvements in our processes. How could we remove the total time something takes? Well, remove the waiting or the blocked time. So how do you know where the time was spent? Well, this is what we're going to talk about. How could we improve our flow efficiency? We're going to talk about blockers. So when we talk about blockers, we want to define what a blocker is, all right? And it's not black and white. There is some art, I should say, in defining what a blocker is, but this is our definition. A special case event in your workflow which prevents the flow of one or more work items. We talked about flow already. An important addition to that is that a blocker is typically handled with urgency and benefits from team swarming. Let me dive a little bit deeper into all these terms. So first of all, special case event means that it's not a standard part of your process. If your process is designed to wait on a third party, for example, and this is what happens pretty much every time, then this is not a special case event. This is just process. This is how you do work, right? But if you sometimes, let's say 1 out of 50 times, you block on a third party or you need their help in order to proceed, then this is not a standard part of the process. And it should be considered a blocker, right? We talked about flow. If the work cannot proceed to the right of your Kanban board, then the flow is hindered and you should probably raise a blocker. A blocker is typically handled with urgency, right? It's not okay to just block something and forget about it. Well, I guess you could do it, but if you were to take blockers seriously, raising a blocker should trigger some action. And this team swarming that we talk about is the best possible action. And it basically means that your teammates come to you to help you, if possible, and if needed, of course. What happens at the Toyota plants when they pull the add-on cord is that the neighboring stations, the people from the neighboring stations, which, by the way, have been trained to help in their neighboring stations, they swarm to that particular place on the production line and help the person resolve the blocker before the whole line stops. So the blockers are the add-on cords in the knowledge work domain. What are some examples of blockers to make it a little bit more concrete? Well, defects, as we already mentioned, it's one of the most common blockers out there. We have non-standard approvals. As I said, if it's a standard process that a manager should always approve something, then it's not a blocker, it's part of the process. But if it's just randomly generated approval due to whatever reasons, then it is labeled a blocker. Critical escalations will often require the people to leave whatever they're working on and focus on this critical escalation. So what do we do with the work that we were paying attention to, but we cannot pay attention to now? Well, we block that work and we focus on this other thing. And I already mentioned about waiting on third parties or other teams, but as not a standard part of the process, can also be considered a blocker. So there's this discussion between what is a blocker and when should I use blockers versus when should I use designated columns in my workflow that represent waiting states. What do I mean is the following. So if I go back to my board, there's this collapsed column here, but if I expand it, it says waiting on third party. It's just a generic label for this column. And if I go to my edit workflow and I hit settings right here, you can see that this column is marked as a queue. So a column in Kanbanize can be an activity or a queue column. And when it is a queue column, Kanbanize considers this column as a queue and counts the time that cards spend inside this column as non-value adding or as non-touch time. Remember when we talked about flow efficiency? It was value adding versus total divided by total. And this is the time that contributes to the total, but not to the value adding. So when should I use a column like this? And when should I use a blocker? Well, I already talked about this. Blockers are non-standard part columns like this are standard part of the process. And how do these compare? So queue columns, can you collect metrics and basically see where time is going? Yes, you can. Can you do it with blockers? Yes, you can. So no difference on that front. Is it part of a process? I said that multiple times. Columns, yes. Blockers, no. Is swarming expected? Well, because queue columns are designed to be there, it's not expected to see any swarming. It's just business as usual. While with blockers, we expect exactly the opposite. Does the queue column enable root cause analysis and continuous improvement? The answer is so-so. To some degree, yes. But with blockers, you can take that even further because, especially if you're diligent about them, they allow you to collect much richer information about the sources of delay. And we will see this in just a second. That's how these two compare. And I want to say one more time that it's not black and white. There's no like super clear separation between when you use one and when you use the other. Just recently, we agreed to use a queue column in our own standard processes when an event happens more than 5% of the time. So if it happens 4 times out of 100, it's a blocker. If it happens 5 times of 100 or more, then it should be part of the standard process. You can use your own definition. There's no right or wrong here. When to block a card, these are just some examples. We tried to make this practical, give you some practical tips. We mentioned some of these already, but when you're forced to switch to some other job, it's a good idea to block whatever you were working on before this forceful switch, and probably use a block type which says working on something with higher priority, or forced switch, as simple as that. When you face a special case condition, we said that already. When you don't have capacity is an interesting one, and it happens quite a lot in our teams, actually, especially in the R&D part of the company, where we get unexpected requests from our clients. For example, if a client finds a bug in Kanbanize and reports that issue, we have this policy that we need to treat the issue with higher priority than the normal work that the team is dealing with. And what they do is basically they block the cards they were working on and pay attention to the issue, and they say, I don't have the capacity to work on 5 things at a time. If you need help, and this is especially true in larger corporations where communication is not always direct. So you don't know basically who on this other team you should contact to get some help. But if you block the card you're working on with software like Kanbanize, you can propagate this blocker to other boards, and other people can see them. And when they see that you're blocking on something, they could come to you and help you out. There is some cultural aspect to this, of course, but if you need help, you can block a card. It basically needs, hey guys, I need help. I can't make it. And I want to give you a quick tip about avoiding blocking cards within queue states. I already showed you what queue columns in Kanbanize are. And if you try to block a card, let me actually show you that. If there's a card in a queue column and you try to block it, let me try to block this one. The system will tell you blocking cards that are not in progress or cards in a queue column will lower your flow efficiency metrics. So we will ask you, are you sure you want to do that? Well, it's not usually a good idea, because when the card is in a queue column, it is already counted as not spending valuable time, all right? And if you have a blocker on top of it, it's like double negative. You skew your metrics to the negative if you do this. Of course, you can do it. It's just a tip we want to give you. And one last thing about blockers is who should be allowed to block cards? We have received this question multiple times in the past, and the answer is simple, everyone. Just as everyone is allowed to pull the unknown cord, and it's actually expected to pull the unknown cord when something's not going right, the same way we expect from our people to block the work when they're not able to proceed, when the work cannot flow anymore. So don't think of blockers as a management thing or as something that only privileged users should be allowed to do. We would encourage basically everyone to be allowed to block the work because that's what triggers a conversation. One thing that I missed to put in this presentation, but comes to my mind now, is a tip about how you run your daily meetings. One of the most important questions that we should be answering at the daily meeting is, am I blocked on certain type of work? And can I help somebody? In the past, and I think that's an artifact of the past really, but it was very popular to talk about, at the daily stand-up, I mean, to talk about what I worked on yesterday. And it's not even what I accomplished yesterday. It was, yesterday I was doing this, today I will be doing this, and it's all fine. I don't think this type of conversation is very valuable, because what you worked on and what you're working on is visible on the board, right? If you're using any sort of visual board, you don't need to say what people can see. So at the daily meeting, discuss blockers. Use this opportunity to see what work is blocked and what can we do to unblock it. And I would extend that to what work is in a queue state and what can we do to move it out of these queue states. You probably saw that I put a yellow color on this column. You can put a red color, orange color, any type of color that would remind people that there's something special about this column, all right? It's not a blocker, but there's something special about this column, and it's not a good idea to have work sitting there forever, all right? So this was about the presentation. Now I'm going to show you quick tips inside Kanbanize that will make your life a little bit easier, at least I hope, when it comes to blockers. So the blockers live right here on the right-hand side under the panel which we call card tokens. So we consider the blockers to be tokens. And our thinking was, let's try to replicate a magnetic board with round magnets that you can just take and pull and put on a card. All right, let me move it out of here. So we make it possible for you to basically go to the bookstore and buy whatever type of magnets you want. Of course, we don't require any payments, but you come here and you can add a new blocker. So you can choose a color for the blocker. You can choose some icon for the blocker. And let's say this is non-standard approval. You create that blocker and go back to your board, and it's now ready to be used. So what you can do is just take it and put it on a card. When you pull it over a card, well, it's obvious that there's a signal to everybody on the board, hey, this needs attention. In the background, Kanbanize starts a timer which counts how much time this card will spend in this blocked state having this particular blocker. And then we can report on that, show you which blockers were happening most frequently and which blockers took the most time. You can add as many blockers as you want to. You can have only one blocker per card. And if you want to remove the blocker, you basically go right-click on the card and you remove it, just like that. So this is the mechanical part of the work. So how you create the blockers, how you apply the blockers. Now, presumably you have some data collected and you want to analyze it. You want to use it for root cause analysis for continuous improvement activities. We have 3 charts that you can use to fulfill those goals. One of them is the blocker clustering chart. You can find it in the analytics module. When you go to blockers, the first one is blocker clustering. It shows you a few things. First of all, the blocker itself here on the left. Then we have the blocked time right here. And then the number of times the cards were blocked with that particular blocker. It's obvious that the darker or the brighter the red color is, the worse the situation is. And if you click on some of the fields, you can see which cards exactly were blocked for how much time and how many times. All right. If you want to filter the board, you can exclude some of the blockers, or if you want to focus just on one, you can do it like this: clear all or select all, whatever. Okay. I want to pay attention to something. People usually make analysis, run analysis with an average value, but this might be deceiving sometimes. For example, if you want to plan the duration of a job, and you know there's a very high percentage of likelihood that it will get blocked, you come here and you see that working on expedites typically, or on average, takes 12.23, what's that, hours, all right? And you say, okay, I will need 20 hours to get the job done, and then 12 more, so it's going to be 32. But actually, if you switch to the percentage, the percentiles here, the times change a lot. And if you see that working on expedite actually takes 18 hours, 85% of the time. So if you want to have 85% probability of nailing your estimation, it's better to use the 85th percentile and not the average, because when you use an average value, you're wrong on average. That's not my thought. Much more much smarter people than me said that, all right? So pay attention to those guys here. And if you want to exclude working days or weekends or whatever, you can configure that here in the chart. Quite useful. The next chart is like a Christmas tree, and it's not easy to grasp exactly what's going on. So I would like to give you a tip. Pay attention to the slope. Okay, if it goes up, it's bad. If it goes down, it's good. And if the left column is consistently larger than the right column, you see there are pairs, right? Each of the columns is a pair of 2. So if the left one, which has the label N at the top, which says basically new, is consistently higher than the one that says R, resolved, what this basically means is that you're accumulating an inventory of non-resolved blockers. If they're approximately equal, as it is right here, it means that the team working on this board is paying attention to blockers, and they're not allowing the blockers to age indefinitely. All right. And there's this line here, which is the trend line. You can switch it on and off. You can employ the trend line to see how many active there are at each moment in time, okay? If this line is going up, obviously bad. If it's flat, it means it's at least it's not getting worse. And if it goes down, it's actually good. It means you're resolving blockers. If you want to make sense of this on a macro level, we can use this summary statistics button here, and it will show you the same type of information, but structured a little bit differently. for each of the blockers, the blocker types that you have defined and you have used, you will see how many new there were for this particular period that you selected, how many active and how many resolved, and how much time it took to resolve. So it's quite comprehensive. And if these are always bigger than these, bad. As you see, this team is doing great because whatever is a new blocker gets resolved virtually all the time. All right, something interesting here. It's the same type of information as we saw before, so nothing new to add here. And the last chart I want to talk about is flow efficiency. It's under flow here, and then flow efficiency. Remember that the flow efficiency was the ratio between value adding time to total time. And Kanbanize will automatically detect which columns you have defined as queue columns. So these guys here, right? And we will select it right here in this queuing stages panel. We will pre-select them for you so that we show you what the flow efficiency actually is. If you want to see what would happen if you added more, you could do it. You see that the percentages is going down. So the more queuing stages, the lower flow efficiency, right? It's natural. If you have no queuing stages and you have no blockers, well, it says not applicable because it's 100% and it's virtually impossible. But what I wanted to show you, and by the way, when you see a column called ready for or waiting for, it's 99.9% of the time it's a queue column. So go in your edit workflow and mark it as a queue column to make your life easier. But see what happens. These guys, they have 70.4% flow efficiency if we're not calculating the blocked time. And this is world-class flow efficiency. There aren't many teams out there that can claim that flow efficiency. But when you put the block days, it suddenly drops to 55. It's still a very, very good number, but you see that ignoring blockers can mislead you with whole 15% and even more. It depends on what you do and how you do it. So it's always a good idea on top of the waiting stage to have your blockers, because you can have a better idea about your flow efficiency. You can have a better idea which blockers are taking the most of your time and how frequently they're being used. So when you sit in your retrospection meeting or your delivery review meeting or whatever type of meeting you use to reflect on your processes, this is the first place I would look for sources for improvement. So this was what we wanted to show you today. I hope it was interesting and informative. Now we have plenty of time to answer questions or to discuss. So please go ahead if you have any comments, questions, or feedback.
Can I ask the questions like live here?
Of course.
I really like the flow efficiency view. Question to this, because this was based on the entire board. Can you also calculate, because we just built it, we are new to Kanbanize, that's why we are also here. We are building more flight level 2 boards with cards which are moving a little bit slower and longer process. Can we do also flow efficiency per card?
Per card, that's a good one. Let me think about it. I think that ideally, if you use the item filter here and you say, I want to, let me take a look. Do we have the IDs of the cards? Okay, if you have a custom ID for the card, you can just filter for this particular card, so and it will show you this particular card. But it's not inside the card itself.
Okay. But there is a possibility through the analytics, through the flow, select the card, and let's say the card is done, and we want to see how good was the flow efficiency, and collect the metrics, because of course we're gonna improve. So we are expecting the flow efficiency we're gonna increase.
Yeah.
But this will be the metrics here. Okay.
Yeah, and actually that's a good trigger for me to talk about filtering, because it's quite possible that different work types will exhibit different behaviors. So it's always a good idea to analyze your work in some sort of segments. Let's say type A versus type B, or class of service A versus class of service B, things like this. So it's possible through the filtering right here.
Okay, very good, thank you. I have different questions also. We start to use on the same board blockers.
Yeah.
In the beginning, we didn't know about which category of the blockers we're gonna have. We just started. So in order to make sure that we have a record of the blockers, we use the generic blocker, because when you pull the generic blocker, you need to write a comment, which we found it very useful. It's not like put the blocker and that's it. Put the blocker and write the comment what the blocker is about. And now we started to collect the data from few weeks, and we are in the moment of, okay, how can we analyze the comments on our generic blockers to find out which type of the blocker do we have? So we are facing this challenge at the moment. We have, let's say, not a lot, but let's say 15 blockers. We are using the generic one with comments. And we are like, we like to analyze what is the blockers with the comments, generic blocker with the comments.
We can
approach this.
Yeah, we can extract this type of information in Power BI, for example, and analyze it there. There's no built-in capability in Kanbanize, because to us, a generic blocker is a generic blocker, and it should be looked at, one by one, basically. So we can go inside the card, go in the history, and see what the blocker was. But metrics-wise, it's a generic blocker. If you need fine-tuned control over that, we can have a quick follow-up session to show you how to get this information from the API into Power BI. It's not very hard, actually. It's quite easy. And then with the raw data in Power BI, you can slice and dice it however you want. And if you're using Google Data Studio or Tableau or ClickView or some other BI solution, it's also possible.
Okay, good.
Just ping our CSM team and we'll let you know how to do it. All right, any other questions?
Yes, I would like to ask something. It's regarding you had in your flow a queue line waiting for something. So now we have a workflow, a process where we wait quite long. Always we do something, we organize something, then we wait for a reaction. We have, let's say we say, please send latest by, but mostly whoever has to send something is not achieving that date. And then we put a blocker. We need to wait for the material, or we need to wait for the tool, or we need to wait for something. Is it beneficial to have always a queue column after something has to be done, where we definitely know we need to wait for something?
Yes, definitely. I would say it's always advisable to have a queue column after an activity column. At least I cannot think of a situation where it wouldn't help. And it's exactly because it shows you two important things. First of all, this work is supposed to be pulled into the next stage. So please think about that when you review what you can do next, as a team member.
Yep.
And second, it helps you calculate your actual flow efficiency. And if you discover that your flow efficiency is what it typically is, like 15% or 20% or typically less, it's actually a gem. It's a treasure because it means you can be 80% better in terms of delivery times without buying more hardware, without hiring more people, basically without doing anything else. You just have to limit the work in progress on these queues. I didn't talk about this, but you can limit the work in progress, the number of cards inside a queue. And when these guys here are ready, if there's no free space to move the card to waiting on third party, then they should focus on resolving these cards versus starting new ones. So this is a pull system, right? We don't allow new work unless work gets out. So first of all, it's a signal to a team. Second of all, it helps you with metrics. So I would say it's always advisable, yes.
And additionally, we are currently organizing that waiting theme with blockers, which I have the feeling makes us looking very bad. And the waiting on third party message with the column just signals that, okay, these guys are waiting for something and they do not block the work. So I don't know whether or not it can be then easily analyzed then, but that is another topic that I will discuss with Konrad.
And we can give you a tip on that.
Because one thing, Dimitar, the queue column, actually in our case here, is not about we are waiting for third party and then when the third party delivery is going to happen, it's going to go to the right. It's going to go back to the left, and they need to be continuous working on it. So it's just visualizing. We need some components, and then we need to go back. I usually don't like to move cards to the left.
Yeah, that's a very good conversation, and I'm not sure if we have time for that, but I can give you my quick thoughts about this and then give you a tip how to deal with the blocker inside a queue column, which you mentioned. So to me, and basically to the people at Kanbanize, it's okay to move whatever and however you want, as long as you're not crossing these commitment lines here. So moving back from the orange area, which is in progress, back to the blue area, which is requested, is not recommended. I wouldn't say it's wrong, because sometimes it's just necessary. You might move it by mistake, right? And then you move it back. But within the same area, the tool is designed to allow this and not to create any issues with that. But moving across commitment lines, we call these commitment lines, because when you move it from the blue to orange, you say, I'm committing that I will finish this. You don't commit when you're going to finish it. You don't commit to anything else, but you say, I'm going to finish this. And when you move it to the green area, you commit to saying, this is done, and I can forget about it. But if it's suddenly not done, then it breaks the discipline in the team. So this is what we can tell about this. And about this waiting state where people are not doing what they're supposed to do, I have two recommendations. One is to use a token, a sticker actually. So the sticker still gives you a visual indicator that something needs to be done, for example, and you can create your own stickers however you want. And it's also not a blocker, so it will not double count the time you spend not working on it. This is one thing. And the second one is through business rules. So you can go to business rules and you can add a new rule. And you can say, for example, a time-based rule. And you can say where when the deadline of a card is in 1 day, for example, on that board, and the column of the card is this one. Then I want you to send a notification to the, let's say, the owner of the card. And I'm using the state-of-the-art version, so I have a field called owner. You still don't have it, but you will have it soon. To you, it will be assignee, but we don't like the word assignee, so we change it to owner. And then you can customize this message. So the system will notify this person one day before the deadline of the card or any other date field that you choose that they're supposed to do something. And another option, if you have an expedite lane for such cases, you can move the card to that expedite lane. So if you had a second lane at the top for expedites, you could move it there through the business rule. And then when you go back to your board and you see that the column is waiting on a third party, but the card is in the expedite lane, it means that we need to take action now, right? So there are multiple ways to tackle this situation, but I would say that blockers is not ideal.
One last question, and then go to Václav, is because when you move to the queue column, let's say created the queue column, moving this already starting the process of counting, but we will need a comment. What is really the third party? What exactly we are waiting for? So it's not automatically forcing you to write the comment. Looks like you just move it and use it in queue. You need to open the card and go to the comment. Is there other way to force comments about why this is a queue?
No. Unfortunately, we don't have anything like this right now.
Okay. Good.
Okay, Václav, do you want to ask a question or just a comment on what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's about the flow efficiency. In case I would were to optimize for a touch time, how would you look for what's the problematic column? Would you use the heat maps, or let's say the flow efficiency is below 30%? I need to find out where the work is piling up. What would you use as a research tool?
Exactly. I would use the cycle time heat map. It will tell me at a glance where the most time is being spent, and knowing which the waiting columns are, you can easily identify which cards contributed to this low flow efficiency. If you click on some of the cells here, you see which cards these are, and you can see how much time is spent here, and you can inspect all the cards and work with the team on identifying the root causes for that and improving it. So yes, exactly, the heat map is about this. Did I answer the question? All right. Do we have any other questions or comments? No? All right. Then thank you very much for your time, everyone.
I still have
Yes, Konrad, yes.
There was a time for questions, so
Sure.
I have plenty of questions. Of
Please
course.
go ahead. Please go ahead.
You show us the evaluation of blockers in the analytics. Is there also another way to create in some kind of a dashboard widget with some blockers activities? How long are the blockers in average, or the analytics is the only way?
You can use the search field, the search facility here, and you can say, what? I want to get the cards from this board. I want to get the block time. And what else? Let's say the block reason. All right. You search for that. Then you can go to the charts here, for example. The data field you can change to block time. And then you can slice the data by some other property, let's say block reason. Like this. Well, we have no reasons, but if you did have, you would see them here. And then you can add this to your dashboard. You can give it a name. You can choose the dashboard to add it to. So you can create charts like this.
A block reason is the type of blocker, correct?
It is, yeah. So
Okay.
I think you might, let's try this on the spot, okay?
Because maybe block reason
It
is
might help
the
you
comments.
with,
It's the comments we are looking for.
it might help you with your analysis. Let's see. So generic blocker, this is generic blocker comment.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
right. So let's see. Here, I just don't remember, all right? But we'll see.
This will be great. Let's hope yes.
Okay, block reason, there it is. Well, there you go.
Yeah, there is one.
Yes, so you can use this type of analysis and you can put it to your dashboard.
Okay.
Or you can use this type of chart. It's very simple charting facility. So don't think of this as Power BI, all right? If you need sophisticated analysis, we can show you how to do it with Power BI. This is just for sample, simple actually reports.
Yeah. We want to start with simple reports which are good enough to us. Power BI is too much for the moment.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Thank you.
All right, so we can then stop the recording, Jana. And thank you very much for joining everyone. I think it was great. Well, I hope it was good, but it was great to see you all and to meet you, and looking forward to the next time.
It was nice meeting you. Have a good day or evening, depending on where you are.